Every moment captures crucial evidence. Every inquiry demands total transparency. Mastering your legal rights, achieving lasting justice.
Fancy ride. How does someone like you end up driving an expensive Mercedes?
The same way anyone does. I purchased it.
Right. Must have been quite the windfall.
My career, my savings, my
Legally
vehicle.
owned and registered.
Officer Jeffrey Fletcher, badge number 4812 of the Detroit Police Department, saw a black woman fueling a $245,000 Mercedes Maybach S680 at a gas station and immediately assumed the vehicle was stolen or purchased with illicit funds. He activated his patrol lights, blocked her in at the pump, approached with his hand hovering near his holster, and demanded proof of ownership because someone like you doesn't drive cars like this unless there's something illegal going on. When Judge Sarah Wright calmly produced her registration proving legitimate ownership, Fletcher accused her of carrying forged documents and threatened to impound the vehicle and arrest her for grand theft auto. What Fletcher didn't know was that Wright was a Superior Court judge who had purchased the Mercedes with 2 decades of judicial salary and careful investments, that the entire confrontation was being captured by gas station security cameras and multiple bystanders, and that his assumption that a black woman couldn't legally own a $250,000 vehicle would cost him his badge, his pension, and result in a $6.7 million lawsuit. If you believe driving an expensive car while black and female isn't a crime, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss stories of bias meeting accountability. Let me know if you enjoyed the story. Let's continue. Judge Sarah Wright had worked her entire adult life to reach the point where she could afford the vehicle currently sitting at pump number 7 on a Tuesday evening in late October. At 48 years old, with 21 years on the Superior Court bench and nearly 8 years as a prosecutor before that, Wright had built a career on relentless work, unshakable integrity, and disciplined financial planning. She lived modestly in most respects, investing wisely and saving deliberately. 3 years ago, she had decided to reward herself for a milestone federal case victory. The midnight blue Mercedes Maybach S680 represented a dream she had carried since childhood in Detroit's East Side, working after-school jobs while watching luxury cars glide past on Jefferson Avenue. It was fully paid for, registered in her name, and insured with coverage that exceeded what many people earned annually. Wright cherished that vehicle, not for its price tag, but because it embodied everything she had survived and accomplished. Tonight, she had just left the courthouse after an exhausting day presiding over a contentious civil rights case. She still wore her charcoal suit, though she had removed her judicial robe and let her hair down before departing chambers. The gas station occupied a corner in an affluent Detroit neighborhood, a brightly lit BP station where she routinely stopped on her route home. Wright stood beside the Mercedes with the fuel nozzle secured in the tank, watching the digital counter climb steadily and mentally reviewing tomorrow's docket. She had planned a quiet evening dinner with her sister, perhaps a glass of wine, then preparation for Thursday's hearing. The autumn air carried a pleasant chill, and the station bustled with other professionals concluding their workday. The patrol car's lights splashed red and blue across the pump island without warning. Wright glanced up from the fuel display as the police cruiser rolled to a stop directly behind her, Mercedes, angled to prevent any exit. The positioning was deliberate, aggressive, the kind of block reserved for felony stops or pursuit terminations. She felt her stomach tighten with a familiar dread, the dread every black professional felt when flashing lights appeared without explanation, when authority arrived with presumption rather than protocol. The pump clicked off, $68.42. Wright removed the nozzle, replaced it in its cradle, and secured her gas cap with careful, measured movements. She would not rush. She would not appear nervous. 2 decades of courtroom composure had taught her the value of controlled presentation. Officer Jeffrey Fletcher emerged from the cruiser with his hand resting on his service weapon. He was mid-40s, thick around the middle, with the weathered expression of someone who had long stopped questioning his own assumptions. He approached with steps that broadcast authority and suspicion in equal measure, his gaze fixed on the Mercedes with an intensity that had nothing to do with traffic violations. The question came laced with condescension, each word weighted with implications Wright had heard throughout her career, in law school, lecture halls, in courtrooms before she wore the robe, in parking lots and restaurants and stores where her presence demanded explanation simply because it existed. "That's quite a car. Mind telling me how you afforded it?" Wright met his eyes with the steady regard she reserved for hostile witnesses. She kept her hands visible, her posture open but firm. "I worked for it, officer, same as anyone else. Fletcher's expression shifted, skepticism hardening into something uglier. Work for it? I find that hard to believe. The insinuation landed exactly as intended. Wright felt anger flare beneath her professional exterior, the accumulated weight of 1,000 similar moments pressing against her composure. But she had spent a career mastering her reactions, channeling rage into precision. Whether you believe it or not doesn't change the facts. It's mine, legally purchased and registered. She moved toward the driver's door, reaching for the handle. Fletcher stepped forward, blocking her path. His hand remained on his weapon, fingers drumming against the holster in a rhythm that communicated threat more clearly than words. Hold on, I'm going to need to see that registration and insurance. And some identification while you're at it. The request was legal, the delivery was not. Wright reached slowly into her vehicle, retrieving her purse from the passenger seat. She extracted her wallet, her vehicle documents from the glove compartment, and handed them across with deliberate care. Fletcher examined them with theatrical scrutiny, holding the registration up to the station lights as though searching for watermarks or forgeries. Around them, the gas station continued its evening rhythm. Commuters pumped fuel, entered the convenience store, departed for homes and families. But a shift had occurred in the immediate vicinity of Pump 7. Other customers had begun to notice. A man at Pump 9 slowed his movements, watching. A woman emerging from the store paused mid-stride, her attention caught by the patrol car's lights and Fletcher's aggressive stance. Phones appeared, angled discreetly toward the scene. The gas station's security cameras maintained their silent surveillance, recording angles and audio with digital precision. Fletcher lowered the documents, his expression broadcasting disbelief. These could be forged. Where did you really get this car? Someone buy it for you? Because women like you don't just walk into a dealership and buy a Maybach. Not unless there's money coming from somewhere questionable. The words hung in the cool air, naked in their bias. Wright felt the familiar calculation respond with anger and confirm his expectations, or respond with dignity and risk being dismissed as evasive. She chose the path she always chose, direct truth delivered with authority. I am a superior court judge for the state of Michigan. I have served on the bench for 21 years. I purchased this vehicle with my own salary and personal savings. The registration you're holding is legitimate, issued by the state of Michigan, and matches my driver's license. Unless you have probable cause to believe I've committed a crime, this stop is unlawful. Fletcher's face registered surprise, then dismissal. He handed back her documents with a derisive snort. Judge, sure you are, and I'm the governor. Let me guess you've got some fake ID to match these fake papers? The crowd had grown. 6 people now openly watched, phones raised, recording. The gas station attendant stood in the doorway of the convenience store, arms crossed, expression wary. Wright recognized the shift. This was no longer a private confrontation. This was public theater, and Fletcher had cast himself in a role that would not age well under scrutiny. She reached into her purse again, this time producing her judicial credentials, the official identification issued by the Michigan Supreme Court, complete with photograph, seal, and security features designed to prevent forgery. She held it out, watching Fletcher's expression as he processed what he was seeing. His eyes narrowed. He took the credentials, examined them with less confidence than before, but doubt did not translate to retreat. Instead, it seemed to fuel something darker, a determination not to be wrong, not to have made a mistake, not to back down in front of witnesses. These could be fake too. How does a female judge afford a car like this anyway? You got a husband, boyfriend, someone financing your lifestyle? The gender bias layered atop the racial profiling created a toxic compound, Wright knew well. She had fought it in law school, where professors questioned her ability. She had fought it as a prosecutor, where defense attorneys challenged her competence. She had fought it on the bench, where litigants sometimes refused to accept her authority. But she had never fought it while blocked in at a gas station, threatened with arrest, her credentials dismissed as forgeries. I don't need to justify my financial decisions to you, officer. I don't need to explain my career or my purchases. What I need is for you to return my identification and allow me to leave, because you have no legal basis for this stop. Fletcher's hand moved to his handcuffs. Step out of the vehicle. I'm going to search it. Wright remained still, her voice carrying the weight of 21 years wielding legal authority. You have no probable cause. You have no reasonable suspicion. You have no consent. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches, and what you're proposing is textbook violation of my constitutional rights. A second patrol car arrived, responding to Fletcher's earlier call for backup. Officer Lisa Townsend emerged, younger, less certain, her gaze sweeping the scene and landing on the growing crowd of witnesses. She approached cautiously, noting the tension, the cameras, the judge standing her ground beside a $250,000 vehicle. "What's the situation?" Fletcher jerked his chin toward Wright. "Grand theft auto, probably. Forged documents. She claims she's a judge, but I'm not buying it." Townsend's expression suggested doubt. "Did you run the plates?" Fletcher hesitated. "Not yet." The admission hung between them. Townsend pulled out her radio, requested a registration check on the Mercedes. The response came within 30 seconds. Vehicle registered to Sarah Louise Wright, Detroit address, no wants or warrants, no reports of theft. Townsend looked at Fletcher, then at Wright. "Ma'am, do you have additional identification?" Wright handed over her driver's license, her judicial credentials again. Townsend examined them, her expression shifting as she recognized what she was holding. She keyed her radio again, this time requesting confirmation of judicial status. The dispatcher's response was terse and immediate. Sarah Wright, Superior Court Judge, active status, no disciplinary actions. The situation should have ended there. But Fletcher, sensing his authority eroding, doubled down. "I want to search the vehicle. There's something off here." He leaned forward, peering through the Mercedes windows with exaggerated scrutiny. His gaze snagged on something in the back seat, a stack of manila folders, the kind used for confidential case files. One folder had partially slipped from the stack, revealing a label. Fletcher squinted, leaning closer, and Wright watched his expression change as he glimpsed his own badge number printed on the tab. For 3 seconds he froze, his mind working through implications he didn't yet fully understand. Then he straightened, reaching for his handcuffs with renewed aggression, as though movement could outrun realization. Townsend stepped between them. "Sarge, maybe we should call a supervisor." But Fletcher was committed now, driven by pride, by bias, by the terrible momentum of mistakes cascading toward consequence. He reached past Townsend, hand extended toward Wright's arm. The headlights of an unmarked sedan swept across the scene, and Sergeant Davis stepped into the fluorescent glow of the gas station lights. Sergeant Michael Davis had been with the Detroit Police Department for 23 years, long enough to recognize disaster from 50 feet away. The tableau at Pump 7 radiated wrongness patrol lights still flashing, a crowd of civilians filming with raised phones, 2 officers in defensive postures around a woman standing beside a Mercedes Maybach that cost more than Davis earned in 4 years. He assessed the scene with the efficiency of experience. Expensive vehicle, professional-looking black woman, Fletcher with his hand near his cuffs, and Townsend positioned between them like a referee preventing contact. Davis approached with deliberate calm, his unmarked sedan blocking the third exit route from the pump island. The woman turned at his arrival, and recognition flickered across her features a half-second before it registered in his own memory. Judge Wright. He had testified in her courtroom twice, most recently 8 months ago in a suppression hearing where she had praised his adherence to constitutional procedure. The recognition changed everything. "What's going on here, Fletcher?" Fletcher's jaw tightened, his hand still hovering near the handcuffs on his belt. "Traffic stop, Sarge. Suspicious vehicle. Questionable ownership. She's got documents, but they don't add up." Davis glanced at the Mercedes, then at Wright, then back at Fletcher. "You ran the plates?" Townsend answered before Fletcher could deflect. "Yes, Sergeant. Vehicle's registered to her. Clean record. No warrants. And she's provided judicial credentials from the Michigan Supreme Court." The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward through Fletcher's expression, surprise bleeding into defensive anger. Davis extended his hand toward Wright, his tone shifting to the respectful formality required when addressing the bench. "Your Honor, I apologize for the inconvenience. May I see your identification?" Wright handed over her credentials without comment, her composure absolute despite the situation's indignity. Davis examined them with care he didn't strictly need, giving himself time to think through the catastrophe unfolding before him. Superior Court Judge. 21 years on the bench. Standing at a gas station, blocked in by patrol cars, questioned about vehicle ownership while a dozen witnesses captured everything on video. He returned her credentials with a nod that carried weight. "Your Honor, you're free to leave. We have no legal basis for this stop, and I apologize for the department." Fletcher stepped forward, his voice rising. "Sarge, she could be using forged." Davis cut him off with a gesture that brooked no argument. "Badge and gun, Fletcher, right now." The words fell like a gavel. The crowd's murmuring ceased. Townsend's eyes widened. Fletcher's face flushed crimson, anger and humiliation warring for dominance. "Sarge, you can't." "I can, and I am. You just detained a Superior Court judge without probable cause, questioned her vehicle ownership based on racial and gender assumptions, dismissed legitimate credentials as forgeries, and threatened an illegal search while witnesses recorded everything. Badge and gun. Now. Fletcher's hand trembled as he unclipped his badge, the metal catching station lights as he handed it over. His service weapon followed, surrendered with the mechanical movements of shock. Around them, cameras continued recording, capturing the moment authority collapsed under the weight of its own prejudice. Davis pocketed the badge, secured the weapon, and turned to Wright. Your Honor, again, my sincere apologies. Do you require medical attention? Would you like to file a formal complaint? Wright's expression remained carefully neutral, though something flickered behind her eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or the grim vindication of being proven right about corruption she had long suspected. I'll be contacting my attorney. I assume you'll preserve all video evidence from this stop. All video will be secured as evidence. You have my word. He pulled a business card from his wallet, offered it across. My direct line. If you need anything, or if there are further issues, call me immediately. Wright accepted the card, slipped it into her purse, and moved toward her Mercedes. The crowd parted automatically, creating space for her departure. She slid behind the wheel with fluid grace, started the engine its purr, a sharp contrast to the tension still crackling through the scene, and pulled away from Pump 7 with careful precision. The midnight blue vehicle merged into traffic and disappeared, leaving behind a sergeant, 2 officers, and a gas station full of witnesses who had just watched institutional bias devour one of its own. Fletcher stood frozen, his face cycling through emotions, denial, rage, desperate calculation. This is ridiculous. I was doing my job. She looked suspicious. That car doesn't match. Davis raised a hand, silencing him. You saw a black woman driving an expensive car and assumed criminality. You ignored legitimate documentation. You dismissed judicial credentials. And most importantly, you did all of this while being recorded from 8 different angles. The department will conduct a full investigation, but as of this moment, you're suspended, pending review. Townsend had gone pale, her gaze fixed on the pavement as though studying asphalt patterns might provide escape from the disaster she'd witnessed. Davis turned to her, his tone gentler. Officer Townsend, I'll need your incident report by end of shift. Full detail, everything you observed. Understood? Livin'. Yes, Sergeant. The crowd began dispersing, civilians returning to their interrupted routines, though phones remained active. Videos already uploading to social media platforms where algorithms would amplify the content based on engagement metrics designed to reward outrage. The gas station attendant retreated inside, already composing the text he would send to friends. You won't believe what just happened at work. Davis escorted Fletcher back to his patrol car, supervising as the suspended officer removed personal items from the vehicle, a coffee mug, a jacket, loose papers from the passenger seat. The ritual felt funereal, each object placed in a cardboard box like artifacts from a concluded career. Fletcher moved mechanically, his mind still processing the gap between his expectations and reality, between the authority he'd wielded 10 minutes ago and the powerlessness consuming him now. Amid the flashing lights and gathering onlookers, one couldn't help but wonder, do you think racial and gender bias in policing will ever truly end? Drop yes or no in the comments below if you face similar doubts about your achievements, or share this story to spark the conversation we all need. The box filled slowly. Fletcher's hands shook as he added his citation book, a flashlight, the trauma kit from the trunk. Davis watched in silence, recognizing the internal collapse happening beneath Fletcher's rigid exterior, the desperate search for justification, the inability to accept accountability, the corrosive certainty that he had been wronged rather than wrong. Townsend's radio crackled with routine traffic, dispatch coordinating responses to fender benders and noise complaints, the ordinary pulse of a city indifferent to individual catastrophes. She stood beside her patrol car, writing preliminary notes with mechanical precision, her thoughts already anticipating the investigation, the interviews, the uncomfortable questions about why she hadn't intervened more forcefully. 3 blocks away, Wright navigated evening traffic with automatic competence, her hands steady on the Mercedes steering wheel despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. The engine's purr provided mechanical comfort, a reminder of stability and achievement in the face of casual degradation. She had endured the stop with the composure expected of her position, but alone in the vehicle's leather-appointed interior, she allowed herself a moment of visible anger, jaw clenched, fingers tightening on the wheel, breath released in a controlled exhalation that carried the weight of accumulated indignities. Her phone rested in the center console. She activated voice command, instructed it to call her attorney. The connection established after 2 rings, and Wright delivered a concise summary: unlawful stop, racial and gender profiling, dismissed credentials, threatened illegal search, multiple witnesses, video evidence. Her attorney listened without interruption, asked 3 clarifying questions, and promised to file paperwork first thing tomorrow morning. The call ended as Wright turned onto her street, the familiar tree-lined avenue providing visual comfort after an evening that had veered from routine into confrontation. She pulled into her driveway, killed the engine, and sat in the gathering darkness. The incident replayed in her mind with courtroom precision Fletcher's assumptions, his escalating aggression, the moment Sergeant Davis recognized her, and immediately understood the magnitude of the mistake. But beneath the tactical analysis, other thoughts surfaced. The exhaustion of constantly proving legitimacy, the corrosive effect of perpetual skepticism, the way success seemed to invite interrogation rather than respect. Inside the house, her sister would be waiting, dinner prepared, wine poured. Wright would recount the evening's events, receive sympathy and outrage in equal measure, and begin processing the incident through conversation and reflection. But sitting in the Mercedes, the vehicle that had triggered such irrational suspicion, she allowed herself temporary refuge in the solitude. The quiet acknowledgement that 21 years of judicial service had not insulated her from the casual racism and sexism that pervaded interactions with authority. Tomorrow, the video footage would begin its viral journey across social media platforms. Tomorrow, her attorney would initiate legal proceedings that would expose the department's failures. Tomorrow, the machinery of accountability would engage with institutional certainty. Tonight, she sat in the car she had earned, in the driveway of the home she owned, and felt the familiar weight of being perpetually questioned, perpetually suspect, perpetually required to justify existence in spaces where others moved without explanation. The interior lights faded to black as the Mercedes' automated systems powered down. Wright gathered her belongings, exited the vehicle, and walked toward her front door, leaving behind the scene that would define the next chapter of her life and Fletcher's career collapse. The video appeared on social media at 11:47 that night, uploaded by the man at Pump 9 who had instinctively started recording when Fletcher's patrol car blocked the Mercedes. The initial post garnered 300 views in the first hour, spread through local networks with headers like "DPD officer harasses woman at gas station" and "This is Detroit in 2024." By 3 in the morning, a second video from a different angle had surfaced, this one capturing audio more clearly, Fletcher's words about women like you, his dismissal of judicial credentials, his threat to search without consent. The audio transformed the incident from ambiguous confrontation to documented bias. At 7:18 the next morning, a Detroit Free Press reporter discovered the videos, recognized Judge Wright from courthouse coverage, and published a preliminary story with the headline "Superior Court Judge Detained at Gas Station, Questions Raised About Racial Profiling." The article included embedded video, quotes from civil rights attorneys about Fourth Amendment violations, and a terse no comment from the Detroit Police Department's Media Relations Office. The story detonated across regional news by noon, then jumped to national platforms as the irony crystallized. Officer Fletcher had not merely harassed a random citizen, but had targeted the judge anonymously presiding over his own pending disciplinary review for prior complaints of excessive force and bias. Network news producers recognized the narrative's perfect symmetry: authority undermined by hidden power, bias destroying the biased, institutional failures captured in high definition. By evening, the videos had accumulated 12 million views across multiple platforms. National civil rights organizations issued statements. Legal commentators dissected the stop frame by frame on cable news, highlighting each constitutional violation with academic precision. Social media erupted with hashtags, personal stories of similar encounters, demands for accountability. The Detroit Police Department's phone lines jammed with calls from reporters, activists, and concerned citizens demanding explanations. Sarah Wright watched the explosion from her chambers, monitoring media coverage between court sessions with a mixture of vindication and weariness. The attention validated her experience, transformed private humiliation into public testimony. But it also reopened wounds she had spent decades learning to manage: the constant burden of representation, the way her individual experience became emblematic of systemic failures, the exhausting role of unwilling spokesperson for injustice. Her attorney, Patricia Reynolds, arrived at the courthouse at 4:30 with preliminary complaint documents. They met in Wright's chambers, door closed, speaking with the directness of 15 years' professional relationship. Reynolds laid out the framework: federal civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983, targeting both Fletcher individually and the Detroit Police Department institutionally. Constitutional violations included Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure, 14th Amendment equal protection guarantees, and departmental failures in training, supervision, and disciplinary oversight. The demand: $6,700,000 in compensatory and punitive damages. Reynolds outlined the case's strengths with prosecutorial efficiency, multiple video angles providing irrefutable documentation, audio capturing explicitly biased statements, Fletcher's disciplinary history establishing pattern and practice, the department's failure to address prior complaints demonstrating institutional negligence, Wright's impeccable professional record eliminating any defense based on reasonable suspicion. The lawsuit, Reynolds predicted, would settle within 6 months. The department's exposure was too great, the evidence too damning, the public pressure too intense for protracted litigation. Wright signed the authorization papers with a pen given to her at her judicial swearing-in ceremony 21 years earlier, the symbolic continuity feeling appropriate for a moment when personal violation intersected with institutional accountability. The lawsuit filing hit federal court the following Monday morning, accompanied by a press conference where Wright spoke for 8 minutes about intersectional discrimination, the presumption of criminality attached to black excellence, and the imperative of systemic reform. She delivered her remarks with judicial restraint, avoiding inflammatory language while making her positions unambiguous. The clips circulated for days, her words becoming rallying points for conversations about policing, gender, race, and power. The Detroit Police Department's internal investigation moved with unusual speed, accelerated by media scrutiny and political pressure from city council members facing constituent fury. Investigators uncovered Fletcher's history: 14 complaints over 9 years, including 3 allegations of racial profiling, 2 excessive force claims, and multiple instances of dismissed documentation concerns. The pattern was undeniable. Fletcher had operated for nearly a decade with minimal oversight, protected by thin blue line solidarity and bureaucratic inertia that treated complaints as isolated incidents rather than accumulated evidence. The review board's recommendation arrived 31 days after the gas station stop: termination for cause, forfeiture of pension benefits, referral to the county prosecutor for potential criminal charges related to deprivation of rights under color of law. Chief of Police Robert Anders held a press conference announcing the decision, his statement carefully crafted to acknowledge failure without admitting liability that might affect the pending lawsuit. He spoke about values, training, accountability, and the department's commitment to serving all Detroit residents with fairness and respect. The words sounded sincere but hollow, institutional rhetoric deployed to contain damage rather than address root causes. For Jeffrey Fletcher, the consequences cascaded with brutal efficiency. Termination meant loss of identity, the dissolution of a career that had defined his adult life. His wife, already strained by years of his anger and rigidity, filed for separation 3 weeks after his firing. His financial situation collapsed as legal bills accumulated and employment prospects evaporated. No security firm would hire an officer terminated for bias. No private company wanted the liability. He took work as a warehouse supervisor, earning $38,000 annually in a job that required no interaction with the public and offered no opportunity for the authority he had wielded and abused. Friends from the department stopped calling, unwilling to associate with someone who had become emblematic of institutional failure. Fletcher's social media accounts, once filled with Blue Lives Matter posts and law enforcement memes, went silent. He moved from the suburban house he could no longer afford to a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood he had once patrolled. The descent from authority to irrelevance took less than 6 months. Meanwhile, Wright's trajectory moved in the opposite direction. The settlement negotiations concluded after 4 months of posturing, the city agreeing to the full $6,700,000 demand, plus comprehensive policy reforms. The settlement included mandatory bias training for all officers, enhanced documentation requirements for traffic stops, creation of an independent civilian review board with subpoena power, and quarterly public reporting of stop data disaggregated by race and gender. Wright used her portion of the settlement to establish the Justice Accountability Foundation, a nonprofit providing legal assistance to individuals experiencing discriminatory policing. The foundation hired 3 attorneys, established a 24-hour hotline, and created educational programs for communities about constitutional rights during police encounters. Within its first year, the foundation handled 47 cases, achieving settlements in 12 and dismissals in 18 others. Professional recognition followed the public advocacy. The Michigan Bar Association honored Wright with its Courageous Advocate Award. National legal organizations invited her to speak at conferences about judicial ethics and civil rights. And 8 months after the gas station stop, the governor nominated her for a vacancy on the federal district court, citing her commitment to justice, her professional integrity, and her demonstrated courage in confronting institutional bias. The Senate confirmation hearing included pointed questions about the incident. Senators from both parties seeking to understand how she would apply her experience to federal jurisprudence. Wright answered with characteristic precision, framing the stop not as personal grievance but as data point illuminating systemic failures requiring structural solutions. She spoke about the necessity of accountability, the importance of evidence-based policy reform, and the judicial obligation to protect constitutional rights regardless of political pressure. The committee voted 14-4 for confirmation. The irony of Fletcher's bias backfiring against hidden power became a case study in police academies nationwide, used to illustrate the dangers of assumption-based policing and the importance of procedural adherence. Training videos incorporated the gas station footage, instructors pausing at key moments to highlight violations and discuss alternative approaches. The incident became shorthand for everything wrong with contemporary policing, the reflexive suspicion of black success, the gendered assumptions about financial capability, the institutional failures enabling repeat offenders. In Detroit, the reforms mandated by the settlement began reshaping departmental culture slowly, fighting against decades of ingrained practice. Traffic stop data revealed patterns previously hidden or ignored. Black drivers stopped at rates 3 times higher than their population percentage. Women questioned about vehicle ownership at rates men never experienced. The Civilian Review Board investigated complaints with authority the Internal Affairs Division had lacked, resulting in disciplinary actions that sent clear signals about acceptable conduct. Sarah Wright still drove her Mercedes Maybach S680, though she now recorded every interaction with police using a dashboard camera linked to cloud storage. The precaution felt simultaneously necessary and depressing, a tacit acknowledgement that 21 years of judicial service and federal appointment had not insulated her from the presumptions that followed black women navigating public spaces. She no longer stopped at the BP station where Fletcher had confronted her, choosing instead a different route home that added 7 minutes to her commute, but avoided the location's accumulated associations. The incident never fully receded from public consciousness, resurfacing periodically when new cases of discriminatory policing emerged, invoked as precedent and warning. Wright's story became touchstone, cited in legal briefs and activist speeches, taught in law school seminars on civil rights litigation. The narrative's power derived from its clarity bias exposed, accountability enforced, consequences distributed with precision that validated systemic critique. Yet beneath the public victory, Wright carried private costs. The hypervigilance that accompanied every traffic interaction, the weariness of perpetual representation, the knowledge that her excellence would always invite scrutiny while mediocrity in others passed without comment. She wore these burdens with the same composed dignity she had shown at Pump 7, understanding them as tax on existence in a society still negotiating the full implications of equality it claimed to embrace. The Mercedes remained in her garage, polished and maintained, driven regularly but never casually. It represented achievement, certainly, but also evidence proof that black women's success deserved celebration rather than interrogation, that hard work and integrity could coexist with luxury, that the American promise of earned prosperity applied universally or applied to no one. Every mile driven was assertion, every trip a quiet defiance of assumptions that had criminalized her presence at a gas station on an autumn evening. In the end, the story transcended its participants. Fletcher's career destruction became cautionary tale. Wright's foundation became institutional legacy. The settlement funds became vehicles for systemic change. The videos became teaching tools. And the gas station stop became crystallized moment when bias confronted consequence, when hidden power revealed itself, when justice imperfect, delayed, but undeniable emerged from cellular video footage and federal courtrooms to declare that driving an expensive car while black and female was not crime, but triumph that demanded recognition on its own terms.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.
Seeking truth is a collective journey, and factual knowledge is your armor. Thank you for viewing and supporting Global Accountability.